In the quiet town of Maplewood, where peaceful streets hide untold secrets, a tragedy separated a man from the dog he loved more than anything. But sometimes, destiny finds its way back even through bars of steel. Before we dive into this deeply moving story, please take a moment and let us know in the comments where you're listening from. Your voices help connect our hearts across distances, making these stories even more special. Now, let's begin. It was a cold November evening in Maplewood, a small, picturesque town nestled in the gentle hills of Oregon. The streets, usually filled with warmth and friendliness, were now glazed with a thin sheen of ice, and gusts of bitter wind whispered through the nearly bare trees lining Maple Avenue. This quaint, peaceful town had rarely known trouble, and the residents were proud of their close-knit community, quick to greet neighbors and lend a helping hand. Yet even here, hidden dangers could surface unexpectedly, altering lives forever. William Harper had always felt safe in Maplewood until that fateful night when everything changed. William Harper was a tall gentleman of 42, known in town for his quiet demeanor and kind heart. He was slender but strong from years of manual labor as a carpenter, with short, chestnut brown hair streaked subtly with gray at the temples, deep-set hazel eyes reflecting warmth and intelligence, and a face softened by frequent, genuine smiles. Most neighbors considered him the very image of quiet reliability and integrity. William's life revolved around two things: his family and his beloved Labrador retriever named Buddy. Buddy, the cheerful Labrador with his glossy cream-colored coat, was as friendly as his owner was gentle. Now 4 years old, Buddy was athletic and strong, always energetic and eager for adventure, his expressive brown eyes forever filled with a playful spark. William had found Buddy as a tiny, shivering puppy, abandoned along a deserted road near town. He'd carefully bundled the pup into his jacket and brought him home. Ever since, Buddy had been William's constant companion, his loyal shadow. William's family consisted of his wife, Sarah, and their 10-year-old son, Ben. Sarah was a petite woman, with a slender figure, graceful and delicate. Her straight blonde hair reached just below her shoulders, framing her pale face and gentle blue eyes, which often looked pensive and distant. Sarah was sensitive, easily shaken by conflict, and had struggled quietly with anxiety since losing her father suddenly when she was a teenager. Her gentle nature made her deeply empathetic, but also emotionally vulnerable to turmoil. William had always felt protective of Sarah, carefully shielding her from harsh realities, attempting to preserve the fragile peace she needed. Their son, Ben, small for his age, with curly brown hair and mischievous eyes, was William's pride and joy. Energetic and curious, Ben adored his father, always begging William to teach him woodworking or play catch in the backyard. Their bond was unbreakable, strengthened further by shared moments and laughter. Life in Maplewood had seemed perfect until that terrible night. It began simply enough. William, Sarah, Ben, and Buddy had just returned home from dinner at a local diner, the evening peaceful yet freezing cold. They had barely stepped onto their porch when harsh laughter and shouting pierced the quiet night. William recognized the voice immediately: Doug Miller, their next-door neighbor, a burly man notorious in Maplewood for his heavy drinking and violent temper. Doug stumbled toward their property, eyes glassy, clearly intoxicated, and began aggressively berating William for allowing Buddy to bark earlier that day, accusing the dog of disrupting his sleep. Buddy, sensing danger, positioned himself protectively in front of Ben, his body tense. William calmly attempted to defuse the situation, stepping forward gently, hands raised to show he meant no harm. But Doug, volatile and unpredictable, suddenly lunged forward, swaying precariously. Before William could fully react, Doug shoved past him, his gaze set angrily on young Ben, shouting incoherently. Panic surged through William. His instinct to protect his son overwhelmed him. Without thinking, William grabbed Doug's shoulders firmly, pulling him away from the boy. The porch, slippery with ice, proved treacherous. Doug lost his balance, staggering backward, his feet sliding out beneath him. He fell awkwardly, striking his head against the frozen concrete steps with a sickening thud. Silence fell over Maple Avenue, broken only by Sarah's horrified scream echoing into the night. Emergency services arrived swiftly, their flashing lights painting the quaint homes in stark red and blue. Paramedics confirmed the tragic news: Doug Miller had died instantly from a traumatic head injury. William, shaken and pale, stood frozen in disbelief as police officers gently escorted him away from his stunned family. Despite his protests, the community turned its back. Maplewood, usually forgiving and understanding, was suddenly cold and judgmental. No one wanted to believe it was an accident. Doug Miller might have been disliked, but William had still caused a death. Within weeks, William found himself sitting in the county courthouse, heart heavy with grief and guilt. Friends he had known for decades testified against him, painting him as reckless and aggressive. Sarah, overwhelmed and heartbroken, began to distance herself emotionally, her fragile spirit unable to cope with the crushing weight of public scrutiny and whispers behind her back. Ultimately, the jury saw not a protective father, but a reckless aggressor. William was sentenced to 10 years in Ridgeview Correctional Facility, a sentence handed down coldly and swiftly. As the verdict was pronounced, Sarah collapsed into tears, unable to even meet William's anguished gaze. Days after his incarceration, she filed for divorce, too fragile to handle the shame and stigma thrust upon her family. William's heart shattered piece by piece. He lost everything: his family, his home, his reputation. Friends and relatives he once counted on ceased all contact. Alone in his cold cell, his heart and mind returned to the only pure and unwavering love he'd known: his faithful Labrador, Buddy. Night after night, he clung to memories of Buddy's boundless joy and unconditional affection, the only comfort in an increasingly bleak existence. Little did William know, in the chaotic aftermath, Sarah, unable to bear reminders of the tragedy, gave Buddy away to a local shelter, erasing the final traces of their shared life. As William sat quietly behind bars in Ridgeview, watching snow fall silently beyond barred windows, he didn't realize Buddy, confused and abandoned, was being driven away from Maplewood, away from the home and master he had loved, beginning a long journey of heartbreak and loss of his own. The first few months in Ridgeview Correctional Facility were brutally lonely for William Harper. The prison, situated in a remote region of Oregon, surrounded by dense forests, seemed to magnify his isolation. The endless gray skies and persistent drizzle matched William's internal anguish perfectly, creating a landscape of perpetual gloom. His once strong shoulders slumped more each day, and his hazel eyes, once bright and hopeful, turned distant and weary. Yet, despite the harsh reality around him, William remained quiet, never causing trouble or drawing attention, clinging to routine as his only comfort. He spent much of his time in solitude, burying himself in books from the prison library, allowing literature to momentarily distract him from the crushing weight of loneliness and loss. Each night in his cell, William lay awake, haunted by images of his former life in Maplewood. Memories of Sarah, Ben, and especially Buddy played relentlessly through his mind, causing an ache that never eased. Sarah had long since ceased any form of contact, the emotional weight of the incident clearly unbearable for her fragile spirit. William often wondered if Ben thought about him, or if his son had been persuaded to forget the father who had once loved him so fiercely. Most profoundly, William missed Buddy. He recalled clearly the comforting warmth of Buddy's presence, the gentle weight of the Labrador's head resting on his lap as they sat on the porch watching summer sunsets, or the rhythmic thump of his tail whenever William returned home. William worried incessantly about Buddy's fate, never suspecting the devastating truth that Sarah, overwhelmed and unable to cope with reminders of their shattered family, had surrendered Buddy to a local animal shelter shortly after William's incarceration. Buddy's journey after separation was anything but easy. Initially left confused and frightened at the Maplewood shelter, he spent weeks pacing anxiously within a cramped cage, his playful spirit diminishing daily. Visitors passed him by, attracted to younger, livelier puppies. Buddy's once glossy cream coat grew dull, his eyes filled with increasing sadness and confusion as days stretched into weeks without any familiar faces. Eventually, a young woman named Jessica Turner adopted him briefly. Jessica, a friendly veterinary technician in her late 20s, petite and energetic, with curly auburn hair and kind blue eyes, initially felt drawn to Buddy's quiet, gentle demeanor. She hoped he would be a good companion, but the Labrador never quite adjusted, often staring longingly at the front door as though expecting someone else. Jessica soon realized Buddy was profoundly heartbroken. After a month, sensing she couldn't provide what the dog truly needed, she tearfully returned him to another shelter closer to the city of Salem, hoping someone else could heal his invisible wounds. The second shelter, Safe Haven Animal Rescue, was run by Mark Evans, a compassionate man in his mid-50s with a sturdy build, short gray hair, and warm, understanding eyes. Mark immediately noticed Buddy's sorrowful state. An experienced caretaker, he saw clearly that Buddy had suffered deep emotional trauma. Although Mark provided Buddy with kindness and gentle care, Buddy remained withdrawn. The Labrador spent his days quietly in the corner of the pen, only lifting his head hopefully whenever someone approached, his deep eyes always searching, hoping against hope to see William's face again. Mark tried placing Buddy with several foster families, but each time the outcome was the same. Buddy, though obedient and affectionate, seemed perpetually sad, as if he knew he didn't truly belong with these temporary guardians. Eventually, Mark stopped trying to find another foster home for Buddy, realizing that frequent changes were worsening the dog's emotional state. Instead, he provided Buddy a permanent place at Safe Haven, giving him as much affection and stability as possible. But even Mark knew that what Buddy truly needed his owner was something beyond his ability to provide. Back at Ridgeview, William gradually accepted his isolation. He kept a low profile, rarely interacting with other prisoners unless absolutely necessary. However, one inmate, Paul Richardson, befriended William during their shared shifts in the prison workshop. Paul was a lean, wiry man in his late 50s, with salt and pepper hair and a quiet demeanor, known for his calm and thoughtful nature. Paul was serving time for a nonviolent financial crime, his demeanor reflective and mature, providing a stark contrast to the harsher personalities around them. They rarely spoke about their pasts, forming a quiet, mutual understanding without needing details. Paul sensed the profound sorrow William carried, and although he couldn't ease his burden completely, he offered quiet companionship and understanding, something William desperately needed. One evening, as rain tapped rhythmically against the barred window of their shared workspace, William broke his usual silence, quietly confiding in Paul about Buddy. Paul listened intently, his usually impassive eyes softening in sympathy as William described Buddy's gentle nature, loyalty, and the heartbreaking separation. Paul, sensing his friend's pain, gently encouraged William not to lose hope, assuring him that somewhere out there, Buddy must be longing for him too. Meanwhile, at Safe Haven, Buddy continued his quiet vigil. Every morning, he rose early, watching the entrance to the shelter attentively, as if expecting William to appear magically at the gate. Days turned into weeks. Months stretched on endlessly. Buddy's eyes slowly lost their spark, replaced by quiet resignation. Mark Evans often paused beside Buddy's kennel, gently stroking his fur, speaking softly to comfort him. "Someday, Buddy," he whispered reassuringly, though even Mark wasn't sure if he truly believed that a happy reunion was possible. The quiet desperation and shared loneliness of both William and Buddy remained unknown to each other, separated by circumstances beyond their control. Each day, William silently mourned his lost companion, unaware of Buddy's own sorrowful plight. As seasons passed, both man and dog clung stubbornly to the fragile thread of memories, hoping silently, subconsciously, for a miracle that might bring them back together. 6 years had passed slowly and heavily for William Harper inside the gray, oppressive walls of Ridgeview Correctional Facility. Now 48, William had aged prematurely under the relentless weight of grief and isolation. His once strong and lean figure had become gaunt, shoulders stooped, eyes sunken and shadowed from restless nights and endless sorrow. William carried himself quietly, avoiding conflict, finding solace only in his brief conversations with Paul Richardson, whose calm demeanor had become his sole source of companionship. William's routine was predictable and unremarkable. Library work, solitary meals, silent evenings, gazing through barred windows at the rain, soaked forests that surrounded the prison. One chilly February morning, however, his monotonous life shattered. William had been feeling unwell for weeks, an ever-present exhaustion that he attributed to poor sleep. But when he collapsed suddenly during library duty, medical personnel swiftly intervened. After a battery of tests in the prison infirmary, the facility's doctor, Dr. Susan Marshall, a stern but compassionate woman in her early 50s with short, silver-streaked dark hair and sharp, attentive eyes, delivered devastating news. William had terminal cancer, advanced and aggressive, with mere months left to live. As Dr. Marshall spoke gently but plainly, William absorbed the news with silent resignation, his mind immediately turning to the one unfinished chapter in his broken life buddy. Determined, William approached the prison warden, Henry Carter, a respected and formidable figure within Ridgeview. Henry Carter, 62 years old, was a tall man with an authoritative presence, broad-shouldered and commanding, his thinning silver hair neatly combed, eyes cold and penetrating, often assessing each inmate meticulously. Carter had earned his reputation as a strict disciplinarian, yet beneath that stern exterior, he carried deep respect for justice and humanity. Rarely did he display compassion openly, but he quietly recognized genuine remorse when he saw it. William had never been troublesome, had no infractions, and had proven himself a model inmitia rarity in Ridgeview. The warden's office was sparsely furnished, meticulously tidy, reflecting Carter's disciplined personality. William stood nervously before Carter's imposing mahogany desk, the quiet ticking of an antique clock the only sound in the austere room. William's voice trembled slightly, but was filled with earnest sincerity as he described Buddy, recounting how the Labrador had been his closest companion, his emotional anchor. To his family when everything else crumbled around him, he begged Carter, knowing it was an unusual request, to allow him just one last moment with his dog. Carter listened carefully, his stern gaze softening almost imperceptibly at William's heartfelt plea. He understood William's desperation not merely as a warden, but as a fellow human being who had witnessed too much tragedy and regret. After a long, thoughtful silence, Carter finally nodded, his voice steady and measured. "I'll see what I can do, Harper." Back at Safe Haven Animal Rescue, Buddy had adjusted to life as best he could under the gentle care of Mark Evans. Yet, even after several years, a shadow of sadness lingered. Mark, understanding the depths of Buddy's emotional scars, kept him close, never attempting another adoption. Buddy had aged noticeably. Now 10 years old, his fur had faded slightly, white hairs sprinkled across his muzzle. His expressive eyes were softer, quieter, still carrying traces of the hopeful puppy he had once been, but dimmed by the years of longing for a reunion that had never come. Mark was surprised to receive a phone call one afternoon from Ridgeview Correctional Facility. On the other end, Warden Carter carefully explained William's wish to see Buddy again before he passed away. Mark immediately agreed, moved deeply by the profound devotion between William and Buddy. Knowing how delicate Buddy's emotional state was, Mark carefully prepared the dog, spending extra time grooming him, gently speaking soothing words, hoping Buddy understood that something special and perhaps healing was about to happen. The day of the meeting finally arrived, a cold and misty March morning. Ridgeview's stark walls loomed forbiddingly as Mark drove Buddy to the prison entrance. At the prison gates, they were greeted by Officer Dylan Parker, a friendly young guard in his late 20s, athletic and good-natured, with short, sandy brown hair and an easygoing personality that eased Mark's anxiety. Dylan guided them through the prison's cold hallways, his presence reassuring. Buddy walked close to Mark, curious, yet slightly apprehensive. Something stirred within him as he trotted along the echoing corridors. Perhaps he sensed that the purpose of this visit was significant, although he could not understand exactly why. His tail swayed gently, and his keen nose twitched curiously at the unfamiliar scents around him. Finally, they reached a small visitation room. Carter stood silently near the door, his face unreadable, but his posture respectful. William, frail and visibly weakened, sat quietly waiting. His eyes widened slightly with anticipation, fingers trembling in nervousness. As the door opened, Buddy hesitated, his ears pricking forward, eyes widening in surprise at the strange, fragile figure before him. William softly called Buddy's name, his voice barely a whisper, hopeful yet fearful. But Buddy only stared, confused, tail lowered uncertainly. Too many years had passed, too much had changed. William's once strong presence was now fragile and weak. Buddy, bewildered, stepped back toward Mark, eyes filled with uncertainty and fear. William's heart sank painfully as silence filled the room. He realized, with bitter sadness, that the long separation had perhaps been too damaging. Just when despair seemed to fill the air, Buddy hesitantly stepped closer, sniffing cautiously. Suddenly, his ears perked, and recognition flickered slowly in his deep brown eyes. He tentatively moved closer, pressing his muzzle gently into William's trembling hands. William gasped softly, tears streaming silently down his hollow cheeks. Carter, Mark, and Dylan all watched quietly, deeply moved by the emotional reunion. Carter silently left the room, granting them precious privacy. William stroked Buddy's fur tenderly, speaking softly as Buddy pressed closer, finally remembering fully the man he had never forgotten completely. William's final wish had been fulfilled, bringing peace to both man and dog. The visitation room at Ridgeview Correctional Facility held a hushed tension that lingered in the air, thick and heavy like the March fog outside the prison walls. William Harper sat anxiously on the edge of a cold metal chair, his frail form enveloped in the loose fabric of his faded gray prison uniform. His hands trembled slightly, fingers nervously clasped together. The anticipation was almost unbearable as he watched the door, heart pounding against his chest. Next to him stood Warden Henry Carter, tall and imposing. Yet today his stern, gray eyes softened with compassion, silently rooting for this long-awaited reunion to mend a wounded soul. Moments later, the door opened quietly. 2 volunteers stepped inside cautiously, their gentle presence evident even in the quiet shuffle of their steps. Leading the way was Megan Thompson, a caring young woman with kind green eyes, her chestnut hair neatly pulled back, her slender frame radiating warmth and empathy. She was accompanied by Kyle Stevens, a calm and reserved man with neatly trimmed blonde hair and a gentle manner that animals instinctively trusted. Both had dedicated their lives to animal rescue and understood the fragile balance of trust between a dog and its owner. Between them, walking hesitantly, was Buddy. Now 10 years old, Buddy's cream-colored fur was still beautiful, though it had lost some of its youthful shine, his muzzle showing a dusting of white hairs, testament to his age and the trials he'd endured. His expressive brown eyes darted around the unfamiliar room anxiously, and his ears were flattened against his head. Buddy was clearly overwhelmed by the strange environment, and his entire body radiated tension and unease. William drew in a shaky breath, heart swelling with emotion at the sight of Buddy. "Hey, Buddy," he whispered gently, extending a trembling hand toward the dog he had missed desperately every day of the past 6 years. "It's me, William." But instead of joyful recognition, Buddy shrank back instinctively, pressing against Megan's legs in fear, a low whimper escaping his throat. William's heart shattered at Buddy's fearful reaction, his shoulders dropping, eyes filling with despair. He had hoped against hope for instant recognition, but this painful rejection cut deeply. The silent room grew even heavier. Megan knelt softly beside Buddy, stroking his fur gently, her voice calm and soothing. "It's okay, Buddy. It's all right." Kyle stepped forward, his voice soft as he explained to William. "Buddy's been through a lot, Mr. Harper. When we rescued him from a shelter, they told us his owner had died. He's carried that trauma with him for a long time." William's expression darkened briefly with sorrow and anger at the realization of what Sarah had done, yet he pushed the bitterness aside, focusing entirely on Buddy's fearful eyes. He knew he couldn't blame Buddy or the volunteers. This moment was his chance to repair the bond that had been cruelly severed. William slowly lowered himself onto the floor, ignoring the aching protests of his weakened body, hoping his vulnerability might reassure the frightened dog. He held out his hand again, voice shaking slightly but filled with quiet determination. "Buddy, it's me. Remember our home in Maplewood? Remember our long walks? The lake by our house?" Buddy hesitated, ears twitching at William's soft voice, still unsure. He took a cautious step forward, nose tentatively reaching toward William's outstretched hand. His breaths came quicker now, as though fighting to place the familiar scent, confusion warring with recognition in his eyes. Then, as if a veil lifted, Buddy's body stiffened momentarily. He pressed closer, sniffing intently, his eyes brightening slowly, ears perking upward. Suddenly, Buddy released a loud, joyful whine, his tail beginning to wag vigorously. He pressed his muzzle against William's hand, then his chest, recognizing fully now the scent of the man who had raised him, protected him, and loved him unconditionally. William gasped softly, tears streaming freely down his cheeks as Buddy lunged forward gently, burying his face against William's chest. William wrapped his thin arms around Buddy's warm body, feeling the reassuring rhythm of his breathing, a comforting reminder of the life they once shared. Buddy's tail wagged enthusiastically, his paws resting carefully yet protectively on William's shoulders, as though refusing to lose his owner again. Warden Carter watched quietly, moved deeply by the powerful reunion unfolding before him. Kyle and Megan stood quietly in awe, Megan wiping away tears that had gathered in her eyes. Even through all they had witnessed in animal rescue, this scene was deeply affecting. Outside the open visitation door, several prisoners who had gathered quietly in the hallway watched silently, their own hardened expressions softened by the emotional display of unconditional love and reunion. Finally, Buddy gently settled beside William, lying comfortably across his lap, head resting contentedly on William's knee. William continued stroking Buddy's fur, whispering quietly, recounting softly all the memories they had shared, reminding the dog that he had never once forgotten him. The room remained respectfully quiet, everyone present feeling the significance of this profound moment. It was a healing balm on wounds that had long remained open and painful, restoring a fragment of peace to a broken man and his loyal companion. As the afternoon wore on, William felt a sense of tranquility wash over him, grateful beyond measure for the chance to see Buddy once more. Despite his weakened state and the limited time he had left, this reunion had filled him with a newfound strength and peace. When Megan gently signaled that it was time to leave, William reluctantly released Buddy, pressing a tender kiss to the Labrador's head. Buddy gazed up at him with trusting eyes, promising silently they would never truly be apart again. William watched as Buddy was gently led away, heart full yet breaking once more at the parting. Warden Carter gently placed a reassuring hand on William's shoulder, quietly acknowledging the courage and love he had witnessed. William returned to his cell that evening, physically weaker but emotionally restored. He knew his time was running short, but the reunion with Buddy had given him closure and peace, the strength to face his final days with dignity and acceptance. In the quiet of his cell, William Harper fell asleep peacefully, dreaming vividly of Maplewood, the warmth of summer sunsets, the familiar laughter of his son, and most vividly, Buddy running joyfully beside him, forever safe and loved. 2 days after the emotional reunion with Buddy, William Harper lay quietly in his prison infirmary bed, his breathing gentle and shallow. His frail frame, now a fragile shadow of the man he had once been, rested lightly against the white linen sheets. William felt no fear in these final moments, only a peaceful acceptance, born from the comfort of seeing Buddy again. By his bedside stood Dr. Susan Marshall, the kind yet stern physician who had guided him gently through the painful months, her intelligent eyes filled with a quiet compassion as she monitored his steadily weakening pulse. Near the foot of the bed, Warden Henry Carter waited respectfully, his usually stern countenance softened, reflective and somber, silently offering his presence as a gesture of respect to a man he had come to deeply admire. With slow, careful movements, William signed the paperwork provided by Carter, officially transferring Buddy into Ridgeview's canine therapy program. It was his final wish, a legacy of healing and love for the dog who had once been his everything. Carter took the documents quietly, offering William a brief, solemn nod of understanding, grateful for this act of generosity and trust. As the evening sun faded gently into twilight, William closed his eyes with a serene smile, the image of Buddy's joyful, trusting face, the last clear thought etched firmly in his mind. Moments later, William Harper quietly passed away, surrounded by an air of tranquility rarely felt within the stark confines of Ridgeview. Buddy was brought to Ridgeview Correctional Facility permanently shortly after William's death. The program supervisor, Hannah Reynolds, was a kind-hearted woman in her mid-30s, tall and slender with gentle features framed by shoulder-length black hair. Hannah had joined Ridgeview 2 years prior, passionate about rehabilitation through animal therapy. Her empathetic nature and patient, soothing voice made her beloved by inmates and animals alike. Hannah carefully guided Buddy through his new role, patiently allowing him to acclimate to the stark surroundings, encouraging his innate gentleness and warmth to shine through. Initially, Buddy showed signs of hesitation and nervousness, likely remnants of past abandonment and trauma. Yet, as days passed, Hannah noticed something remarkable. Buddy seemed to sense exactly who needed comfort most. His warm brown eyes, always watchful and observant, could detect pain hidden beneath hardened facades. His presence became a gentle balm, soothing even the most hardened inmates, restoring glimpses of humanity and hope that many had thought lost forever. One inmate particularly touched by Buddy's presence was Thomas Burke, a tall, rugged man in his early 50s, whose rough appearance-grizzled beard, broad shoulders, and sharp blue eyes concealed a quietly grieving heart. Thomas had spent nearly a decade incarcerated, imprisoned for mistakes stemming from grief and anger after losing his family years before. Buddy's gentle, consistent visits gradually broke through Thomas's barriers, his persistent kindness softening the edges of bitterness that had hardened over years of isolation and despair. Thomas often sat quietly with Buddy, gently stroking the Labrador's soft fur, silently finding comfort in Buddy's calm presence. Buddy's impact was equally profound on younger inmates, especially Jordan Mitchell, a quiet, introspective 25-year-old with short black hair, lean frame, and expressive dark eyes clouded by regret. Jordan had recently entered Ridgeview, burdened by guilt and the overwhelming sense of hopelessness. Buddy seemed instinctively drawn to Jordan, often sitting quietly beside him during group sessions, his warm head resting reassuringly on Jordan's knee, offering unconditional comfort that words alone could never provide. Hannah frequently noticed Jordan slowly opening up more, speaking honestly for the first time about his feelings and fears, a transformation sparked by Buddy's quiet empathy. Months turned to years, and Buddy gradually became an essential part of Ridgeview's rehabilitation efforts, quietly transforming the bleak prison environment into one where healing was genuinely possible. His cream-colored coat had faded slightly with age, his movements slower and more deliberate, yet his unwavering compassion remained as powerful as ever. Ridgeview's inmates, guards, and volunteers alike all came to cherish the gentle Labrador, grateful for his simple yet profound influence. Hannah, deeply moved by Buddy's special relationship with William, made sure to honor the memory of their bond. One afternoon, she carefully hung a small photograph of William smiling happily beside a younger Buddy just inside the entrance of the canine therapy office. Inmates often paused briefly before it, silently inspired by the powerful story of friendship and forgiveness, allowing the memories of William and Buddy to instill quiet hope within them. Yet, perhaps the most poignant moments occurred during Buddy's routine walks through the corridors. Each day, as he trotted beside Hannah, Buddy would inevitably pause at the entrance of William's former cell. He would stand silently, ears drooping slightly, his deep, soulful eyes gazing softly into the empty space that once housed the person he loved most. Then, gently, Buddy would let out a soft, quiet whimper, tender, eternal tribute to the man who had loved him unconditionally, the man he would never forget. Over the years, countless prisoners and guards alike witnessed this heartfelt daily tribute. It became an unspoken reminder of how deeply the bonds of love and loyalty could persist, even through loss, loneliness, and separation. Buddy's quiet, faithful ritual transformed the memory of William Harper into a symbol of resilience, kindness, and the enduring power of compassion. The legacy William left behind continued to touch countless lives, healing wounds both visible and hidden. And although Buddy eventually grew frailer, his gentle spirit remained unbreakable, always patiently offering comfort, always silently honoring William's memory. In his own quiet way, Buddy taught everyone at Ridgeview the greatest lesson of all: that true friendship and love endure forever, living powerfully in the hearts they touch, impossible to forget. The story of William and Buddy reminds us that true love and loyalty never fade, even in the hardest of times. It teaches us that compassion, forgiveness, and friendship can heal the deepest wounds, bridging even the widest separations. Remember, sometimes the greatest gift we can give is simply being there for someone when they need us most. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to leave a comment and let us know your thoughts. Share this story with someone who might need a reminder that love truly can overcome all obstacles. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel to hear more inspiring stories like this one. Your support helps us spread these powerful messages further, reaching hearts everywhere.